Hello everyone, welcome to a new chess video. Welcome to the Evans Gambit lesson, a super aggressive gambit full of traps, which I know you all love. In this video, I'm going to show you the whole range of traps you can set up by playing this opening. So what's good about this opening, besides all the traps? Well, mainly your opponents usually don't know it, especially up to 2000, 2100 elo. People are really poorly prepared for this gambit. How did we get to this position? Let's show it quickly, so we can see how you reach the Evans Gambit position. We play e4, the opponent plays e5, you know, the two most famous moves in chess, the double king's pawn opening. Knight to f3, knight to c6, defending the e5 pawn, bishop to c4, the Italian opening. And you already know there are two options here. Play the two knights defense, or the more popular move, bishop to c5. So, against the most popular move, bishop to c5, we're going to play this brutal move, b4, sacrificing a pawn in exchange for gaining some extra time on top of the time advantage we already have as white. Let's look at all the options the opponent has here. In other words, is it worth it for us to give up this pawn in exchange for the time we're going to gain? Well, it's definitely worth it. And we're going to explain all the options we have when they accept this pawn sacrifice on b4. First, what we're doing here is gaining this tempo with the move c3. Notice that now, if this bishop were to retreat here, it would have lost a tempo, and it's true that we're down a pawn, but we already have this foothold to play d4. That said, the bishop doesn't have to retreat here necessarily. It actually has a lot of options. It can retreat to a 5, c5, d6, or it can also go back to e7. The one we won't consider is if it retreats here, because they'd be wasting a super valuable tempo, since they'd have to bring it out again, right? So let's start with the first option. The most logical move, although it's not a good one and would already be a mistake, is bishop to c5. Let's see how to take advantage if they retreat to bishop c5. Well, obviously here we're going to play d4 directly, which is why we played c3. And when they take, we'll see that this pawn is also a gift, and we've given away two pawns, since we're not going to take here again because they'd have this check available, right? Or even retreat. Here, what we're going to do, against all odds, is castle. Look, and let's really focus on this position. We've given up two pawns, but in return, we have a very open center, a lot of tactics aiming through here, a queen open on both sides, and our king is castled. Very important, the king is castled, while our opponent's king is still in the center. Let's see what happens here if black makes the move that seems most logical and is at the same time the most commonly played move in this position, which is pawn takes pawn, exc3. Oh, dxc3, sorry. Notice that here, black would end up with 3 extra pawns. We could recapture this one, leaving them with 2 extra pawns, but what black wants here is to get rid of this loose pawn they have over here. So they exchange it, and that way they make sure to have 2 extra pawns. But notice that this is already a mistake. And if you've watched, which I highly recommend if you haven't, the video that's a bit long like this one about the Italian game, Gioco Piano, we have some very similar ideas. Bishop takes f7, check. We're giving up the bishop, pulling the king out of his square, a kind of attraction sacrifice. And when he takes our bishop, we have the move queen to d5 check, also attacking this bishop. For example, if the king moves away, we could capture the bishop and then take back this pawn, recovering the material we're down. But first, I recommend giving this check. And when they push here and weaken this diagonal, we'll take the pawn. And now we're threatening to take this pawn, and also taking advantage of the open diagonal. Let's review up to this point for a moment, because I think I've gone too fast for some of you. e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, the Italian opening, bishop c5, the most popular response to the Italian opening, and here we play b4, the Evans Gambit. We sacrifice a pawn in exchange for getting a tempo with c3, and we're looking at what happens if the bishop comes to c5. We'll play d4. When they take on d4, instead of recapturing, we're going to castle, waiting for them to take here so we can sacrifice our bishop. But notice that here, black might say, okay, fine, so if you have this whole plan and I'm going to end up worse, I'm not going to take that pawn there. Instead, I'm going to go for a plan very similar to the Mora Gambit, which is to push this pawn. Oh, and if you want a video about the Mora Gambit, which is also a spectacular gambit, just let me know in the comments and I'll make it, no problem. It'll be a video just like these ones you all enjoy so much. Give me a big like, because I'm really putting a lot of effort into this, and I'm giving it to you completely for free. Now, let's see what happens if they push this pawn here. Well, notice that this is still a weakness, and we're going to take full advantage of it now with the knight. Notice that we're attacking this point with the knight and with the bishop, and it would have to be defended with one of the two knights. Notice that whether they defend this way or that way, the plan remains the same. So what's the plan? Well, look, this bishop is still hanging, and what we're going to do, for example, let's say they defend with this knight, right? So we're going to play bishop takes check. They have to capture with the knight. Knight takes. They have to capture because if not, look at the skewer between the queen and the rook. They have to capture. And now we're going to take advantage of the fact that the bishop and the king are exposed, and we're going to win the bishop. Oh, queen to d5 isn't possible now, but queen to h5 is. Notice that it's check, and when the king moves away, check over here. Notice that if the king comes, for example, where could he move to? No, actually, if he comes here, it's bad, simply because, well, we'd capture with check. No, it's basically the same. I just wanted to show all the options. Okay, if he comes here, then we capture with check, and then we'll recover that without any problems. All right? Notice that if they attack us here, we could simply come over here and we'd recover this pawn on the next move. So we've seen e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, bishop c5, b4, Evans Gambit. We capture here, c3, we gain time. We're looking at what happens with bishop to c5. We've seen that we would play d4, pawn takes here, and instead of recapturing, since black would have a check, we castle. We've seen that capturing was very bad. We've seen that d3 was also very bad. Here we're going to look at another very logical move, which is knight to f6. Knight to f6 is also a very bad move. Notice, why is it so interesting to play this Evans Gambit? Well, because we have so many ways to win, and the opponent has so many chances to make mistakes, that if we know them well, we're going to win most of our games. That's why it's so interesting. Now, let's see how to win when they play this knight here against us. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to give me a big like, since I'm doing this completely for free, because I love explaining things to you and learning with you. So give me a big like, and above all, leave me comments, because I love talking with you. Notice this move is a mistake. Why? Because it allows us to capture on d4 with a gain of tempo. Now, black no longer has this check, which is why it was so important to castle, and after the move c takes d4, this bishop has to go wherever it wants. Let's say, for example, back here somewhere. Well, now we have the move e5, attacking this knight, and this knight doesn't have any good squares to retreat to. If it comes to e4, simply with a move like queen to e2, this knight is completely trapped. Notice that it can't be defended with d5 or f5 either, since en passant capture is possible, okay? Therefore, this move is very bad. Let's see what happens if they retreat it, for example, to h5 or to g4. Well, notice that if it comes this way, we're going to play bishop takes f7 check, and when the king comes over here, simply with a discovered attack, check with the knight. And on the next move, we'll capture this knight with the queen. And besides, black would have lost the right to castle. Let's look at the best line for black to defend, but I'm going to show you a hyper-aggressive variation that's going to blow your mind. Those of you who are more aggressive are going to love it. Check this out. They take here, we play c3, bishop to c5, d4, e takes d4. Here we recapture. Remember that we castle. And now we've already seen all the moves, right? Pawn takes pawn was bad, pushing the pawn was bad, knight here was bad. Black is running out of options. The only option left is d6, which is actually the best one. So here, what we're going to do is recover this pawn while gaining a tempo, since they don't have the check. When the bishop retreats, now what can we do? Well, I'm going to call it the liar. And you might ask me, why is it called the liar chestige? Because it's the most aggressive move of all, but it looks like the most passive. h3. Notice that now black is threatening to bring the bishop in very strongly, because after knight takes d4, they'd be putting us under a lot of pressure. Therefore, we have to prevent this bishop from coming here. With h3, we're forcing black to continue developing, but they can't come here. They attack our pawn, we simply defend it, black castles, and here, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be us who enter the aggressive variation. Notice that now the roles have switched thanks to h3, and we're the ones pinning the knight. And look, we're attacking a lot here. At times, we're threatening to break in here, but above all, look where you're going, little knight, bringing the knight to d5 and putting on incredible pressure. Because now, if this were possible after capturing, we'd force black to recapture with the pawn, leaving their castling completely exposed. Therefore, here black plays h6 in 99% of games. We keep the pin on the diagonal. It's important not to move away, because otherwise we'd be wasting everything we've been trying to do. And now, what happens if they play g5, which is the only move that breaks the pin? Well, notice that here, the new engines already consider this move to be completely winning. Look, completely winning, sacrificing the knight right here. And after the knight is captured, we recapture. Notice that the pressure continues. They no longer have h3 as an option. We've traded a piece for 2 pawns, and we've left the king completely exposed while regaining this absolutely impressive pressure. Here, there's only one move that saves black, and I suppose you've already guessed it. Bishop takes d4, since it keeps defending this knight, and at the same time puts pressure on this other knight here. Here, if you want, I'll suggest a trap. Place the knight here, giving up the rook. Because if they take the rook, after queen takes bishop, we'd be putting on absolutely brutal pressure, and would win the game here without any problem. The thing is, this is just a trap, and it could happen that after playing this, they don't take the rook, and we end up, well, a little worse off. Therefore, I recommend an absolutely incredible move, and for that, we have to ask ourselves a question. Let's see, what is supporting the knight, which is our main threat? Well, it's the bishop on d4, which is why it came all the way here. So what we're going to do is play knight to e2, threatening this bishop and forcing them to take our rook. Notice that earlier we said, of course, if they take the rook, we win, but if they don't take it, then what? Well, here we're going to force them to take it. Notice that here they have several options. For example, they could come over here, but we would attack them, and they'd have to move over here. And for example, here we could attack them like this, or even more easily, without giving up the rook, and now they wouldn't be able to stay on this diagonal. Therefore, what we're doing is forcing them to take the rook. Once they take the rook, we'll simply capture this bishop, and we'll be putting a lot of pressure here. Is there still a move that saves the position? Yes, knight to e5. Look, it's blocking the diagonal, so it's still holding on. But as you all probably guessed, here the best move is f5, telling this knight to get out of here. If you want to take this bishop for free, go ahead and take it, because now I'm going to capture this knight here. I'm attacking the queen and defending with the bishop. Notice that this bishop is absolutely lethal, because it doesn't let anyone come to defend here. And when the queen moves away, no matter where it goes, you don't even need to bring the queen over here, because just by bringing the rook to the 3rd rank, we're threatening to come in through here, and we'll be completely winning. There's no way to escape checkmate. Notice that this is an absolutely incredible position, where we're down a full rook, but it's a super aggressive line to counter the bishop on c5. We've seen that after the Evans Gambit and taking, retreating the bishop to c5, all the variations give us a huge advantage. Okay, chess teacher, all this is very nice, but how am I supposed to win this position being down a rook? Well, I was about to move on to the next one, but I thought maybe some of you don't know how to finish off this position, so I'm going to show you. Imagine that black tries to defend, for example, with queen to d5, to bring the bishop over and try to defend. I'm telling you, there is no better option. So we would simply bring the rook, check. The king can't come here because of the bishop, so it would have to come this way. Then we'd bring in the rook, check. Notice that this bishop is also defended by the queen. This queen is attacking, this knight can come in, we're attacking with all our pieces, while the black pieces, look where they are, far from the king. The king has to move. Now, what are we going to do? Well, check with the bishop. Notice that this queen is still defending the rook, so the king has to go here. And now we would deliver checkmate with the knight. Spectacular. Notice that this variation is super aggressive, but we're going to checkmate anyway. Many of you might be thinking, okay, if bringing out the knight to f6 is a mistake, since we can easily take advantage of it as we just saw, what happens if they play the knight to e7? What happens if black knows that the knight can't be developed to f6 and instead brings it out to e7? Well, notice that since I like to explain all possible variations in a video, so you have the full repertoire to win, we're also going to explain what would happen if they play the knight to e7. So look, in this case, the knight, which is the best defender of the kingside castling when on f6, would be completely out of the picture. Therefore, with a simple move like knight to g5, we'd be threatening this square here with a fork, practically forcing black to castle. And once they've castled, they no longer have the best defender of the kingside, so a simple move like queen to h5 would be completely winning. We're threatening checkmate. The only way to stop it is h6, and after the move knight takes f7, we'd be completely winning. We get the material back, we're threatening the queen, we're threatening discovered attacks. For example, if the queen moves over here, With this move, we'd be giving check and winning back the queen. We could play any move. Imagine if black moves the queen here, well, it's exactly the same. We'd come over here, and with this discovered check, we'd win back the queen. So we'd be completely winning if they move the knight here. So, and sorry for repeating myself, let's go back to the beginning. I think it's really important to stay focused from the start, and remember all the moves so you don't lose track of what's going on. Knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to c5, bishop to c5, b4, setting up the Evans Gambit, bishop takes b4, c3. We've looked at all the options for bishop to c5. How to punish them? Absolutely all of them. We see that it's a really bad move. Let's see what happens if they played bishop to a5. It's a slightly better move, and I'll tell you this is the most popular one. Bishop to a5 is the one they play in most cases. And the second most popular is bishop to c5. So let's see what happens with bishop to c5. Obviously, if you've been paying attention, you'll know that the next move is d4, giving up this pawn, since we're not going to recapture it. First of all now, because we can't here, we can't capture because it's pinned by the opponent's bishop. So what we're going to do here is, instead of castling, play queen to b3. Queen to b3 isn't the main line, but it's the secondary line with better results. Seeing that the opponent with the black pieces, knows the line, or maybe just got lucky, let's say, by finding the move bishop to a5, let's assume they know the line. We're going to put massive pressure with the bishop and the queen on this point here. Notice that now it can be defended in two different ways, queen to e7 or queen to f6. Let's go with queen to e7. That way they leave the option for the knight to go to f6, since that would be the most logical move to me. So when they play queen to e7, we're simply going to castle, okay? Now we can castle, once we've established the pressure. Notice that here we've already given up 2 pawns, and taking a third would just be excessive greed. Why? Well, notice that here, after recapturing with the knight, we're threatening to bring the knight in here with disastrous consequences. So here they'd have to give up the pair of bishops by playing bishop takes knight, and after queen takes bishop, we'd be threatening this spot here with our queen. Therefore, they'd have to play knight to f6 no matter what, and now we'd have a wonderful move. We'll bring the bishop out here, we'll bring the bishop out to a3, taking advantage of the fact that we don't have the b2 pawn. Sometimes the very pawns we've given away are giving us escape routes, which would actually get in our way if they were still there. We'll bring the bishop out here, protected by the queen. Attacking this queen, notice that it's absolutely necessary to play d6, because it can't move away this way or we'd capture it. If it comes over here, we'd already be threatening to come in here, once again attacking with the queen or the knight. And besides, this bishop would be trapping the castling, so the queen can't move. They'd have to play d6. And now the killer move is e5. Notice that they can't capture, obviously they can't take with the pawn, because the queen is pinned. They'd have to capture with the knight, but after knight takes knight and queen takes knight, notice that the queen and king are completely exposed in the center, and with a move like rook fe1, we'd win the queen. So, as we've seen, after all these moves, bishop a5, d4, and after pawn takes d4, here we're going to play queen b3, as I mentioned, attacking this point, queen e7, and we're going to castle. As we've seen, taking this pawn is just being greedy. Black already has 2 extra pawns, so why take a third and make things more complicated? Here, the best move is to retreat the bishop to b6, defending this pawn. This is the best move for black, but let's also see how to play against it. So here, we're simply going to take back the pawn, and if you notice, now black has played this bishop here, so they can recapture with the knight. Well, here what we're going to do is just capture with the knight, and after the capture, we'll bring the knight over here. Notice that, now we've brought the knight out here again, we're threatening to come over here, we're threatening several things. The best move for black here is knight to f6 to castle quickly. It's the most common move, and also the best one. Here, we're going to respond as follows. We're going back to the tactical theme of the pin that we've seen in previous versions. What are we threatening then? Well, bringing the knight here with disastrous consequences. Notice that here, what they can do first is play c6 to prevent this knight jump. In fact, the best move here is c6, and what we're going to do is capture, well, bring this bishop out to force a trade to remove it from defending this knight. For example, if it comes here, we would play f4 again, and this bishop would have to leave or be traded. So we're forcing them to take our knight. Once they take our knight and we recapture here, notice that we have multiple threats. Here, you may have noticed that this pawn can't be taken, because if they take it with a move like rook to e1, we would win the queen. so this pawn can't be taken. Notice that here, the most common move is for them to castle, and what I like to do is bring the rook into the attack. Look, in this plan we're using ideas from the previous plan, so if you really understand this video and watch it as many times as you need, we can gather all the ideas and when you play a game, all these ideas will come to mind, and you'll be able to win in all sorts of ways, no matter what they do. Notice that here we're threatening to bring this rook into the attack, and once this rook... Imagine now, for example, that they play this move to develop the bishop. We'll bring the rook into the attack, and they might develop the bishop here to try to trade. Here we could simply take this bishop. Notice that they can't capture with the pawn, since it's pinned by the rook. They also can't capture with the queen because then we'd be taking the queen completely for free, since it can't be recaptured either. So the threats would be spectacular. Now let's see what happens with black's last option, which is the most solid. Bishop to c5. Here we're going to play the Evans Gambit. Sorry, I'm getting a bit carried away. We capture here c3. We've seen what happens if they retreat to c5. We've seen what happens if they retreat to a5. What happens if they retreat to e7? Well, notice that this is the most solid response from black, bringing the bishop back to e7. You might say, chess teacher, it's impossible for black to have problems here by retreating a bishop to e7. There are no attacks. No attacks, my friend? No attacks? Let me show you how to attack this. We're going to play d4. What happens if e takes d4? Notice that now we'd be, once again, using the same technique as before, breaking in the center to give these bishops more mobility. And now notice that this square can't be defended by the queen anymore, because this bishop is blocking her. So, with a move like queen to b3, putting pressure on the f7 square, we'd be completely winning. Notice that you can't come over here anymore, because we would simply capture, and now we'd be putting pressure here again. So, they can't defend with the knight, and there's no way to defend this. So, taking here is a very bad move. Let's see what happens if instead of capturing, they play, for example, d6. Well, exactly the same thing would happen. We would come in with queen to b3. This queen can't come over to defend, and we'd be completely winning by bringing in the bishop and forcing the black pieces out of their castling. So what's the right move here when we play d4? Sorry, this is here. When we play d4 as black, so the right move is knight to a5. If they play knight to a5, which is the correct move, I'm going to explain the two ways you can deal with this move. If you play knight takes e5, you simply recover the material, and after knight takes bishop and knight takes knight, we end up with an equal position. It's true that this is a very comfortable position to play, since we have the possibility to castle on the next move. We have the bishop, which can now come out. So we're in a pretty comfortable situation. But I'm going to recommend a move that I like even more, which is when this is here, and this is here. When they play knight to a5, you play bishop to d3. And notice that now, after they capture, we'll take with the pawn, and we have a very good situation with a really strong pawn center. And when they bring out the knight attacking this pawn, we still can't play e5 because they'd come in here, but we can first play knight to c3. Covering the square. After castling, then we could play e5. Notice that this knight could no longer come here, but would have to go back, and the situation would be very favorable. If instead of castling they play, for example, d6 to prevent this, we have the option of bringing out the queen to a4, check, and we'd win the knight, since it can't retreat this way. Since d5 would be a move where we'd win the knight. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Give me a big like, because I've been recording this for more than an hour and a half. Even though with the edits, the video will end up much shorter and more flexible, so I can explain it without you losing an hour or two of your life. So, I hope you loved it. Give me a big like for my voice, which can't take it anymore, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye!